Hi, everyone. My name is Avi. I'm the head of customer products at Iwoka. Iwoka is a B2B lender. We serve SMEs, small, medium businesses, very much like Tide, but only on kind of the loan perspective. So why would an SME come to Iwoka to take a loan? I'm going to take you throughout this presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, about Iwoka, and then we'll talk about processes and ways for people to empower themselves and feel accountable, and processes that will help you kind of function better as a team and deliver and get more impact. So going back to kind of what I started with, why would anyone kind of want to come and kind of take a loan from Iwoka? Most people don't know Iwoka. And I mean, the small businesses, they don't know Iwoka. They know all the kind of high street banks. But the problem with having a small business is that all of the businesses are different. If you're a plumber, if you're an electrician, if you're an Uber driver, if you're an Instagram influencer, if you have a pizza place, all of these businesses are very, very different. And the banks don't have the time to kind of spend and try to understand each business and each financial plan and what are the levers that make a business successful or less successful. And therefore, it's hard for a bank to give a loan to a small business because they find it really hard to assess them. And the strategy that banks kind of had in the past to give loans to small businesses was some sort of cookie cutting criteria. Does the business kind of fit this and this and this criteria? And if it doesn't, then sorry, we can't really help you. In addition to that, you can imagine that you have like relationship managers, but the problem with relationship managers is they spend time in the relationship where they can get the most amount of impact, and that's usually like bigger companies. So small businesses were kind of not getting the service that they're supposed to get to. If they wanted a loan from a bank, they would usually take like 28 days, like a month, to get a meeting, sign all the forms, like lots of paperwork. Whereas we do it in 1 or 2 days. And sometimes we also have like a record of 3 minutes and 15 seconds to give someone 100K. So because of our speed and because we're not cookie cutting and we're able to cater for small businesses, they come and work with us. And that basically means that we are fast and that we have like a higher risk appetite. Why do you need fast? Let's look at two examples, like an example from like the good side, an example for kind of the bad side, like an opportunity and a problem that has occurred. On the opportunity example, let's think of a fashion designer who suddenly got in contact with someone from John Lewis who said, I need 300 of these t-shirts. I want to put it in my collection and start selling it next week. Now that fashion designer is probably a small business and he doesn't have the money to suddenly go and kind of produce these amounts, and definitely not kind of accelerate the production of these garments. And therefore, if they would kind of have to rely on the bank, they would lose the deal. So they would come to us knowing that anyway, John Lewis will pay them, although they will pay them probably in 30 or 60 or 90 days. And they will come to us to do this. An example from the bad side is some of you who have freelanced before know that there is a chance where someone doesn't pay you or doesn't pay you on time. And you still need to pay salaries to your employees, because if you start not paying them on time, they would basically leave or like think that the business is in some sort of financial problems. So if there is a cash flow issue, or alternatively, if you forgot like a VAT bill or something like that, then you would need help and you would need it quick. And that's kind of like some of the examples for when kind of people kind of come in and join Iwoka and take a look. So as I said, I'm the head of customer product, and being head of customer product means that I'm responsible for the product managers, for the designers, researchers, and kind of some streams of work from the developers, and accountability for the business. The first thing I kind of want to kind of take you through is different types of organizations and how they work. So there is like a really, really good article by a guy named called Matt Esselstone. I can drop a link later on. And he's writing about kind of code-based organization and kind of product-based organization. So you can imagine not every organization has a CPO, and many organizations don't have a CDO or like a VP design or something like that. And in these organizations, usually what it means is that they're kind of code based. However, in the growth trajectory of a company, you have the kind of the difference between those two. So if you start, like, if you're a startup and you're starting to work on a company, you don't really care about like the quality of the code at the beginning, right? What you're trying to understand is, what is the problem that I'm solving for the user? Am I solving it right? And then you throw variety of experiments at this problem and try to solve it efficiently. In that example, you can use throwaway code. And once you kind of hit product market fit and customers start using it, and you see kind of some sort of growth trajectory, then suddenly you go into other difficulties. The difficulties are, oh, the infrastructure doesn't work. Oh, like the website crashes. There are bugs, et cetera, et cetera. And then usually what happens is that organization shifts to being a code base. They start having like more engineers, the engineers improve the code base, and it kind of gets better for scalability. But then at some point, the product needs new features, and you need to drive more engagement, or kind of the growth trajectory slows down. So you want to introduce that. You shift back to kind of a product-based approach, right? And that kind of up and down kind of goes continuously until you get to a point where you have some sort of mixture between the two, although one of these approaches would lead. And there's advantages and disadvantages for each one of those. So one of the advantages of being a product base is that you can spin out features very quick. You're very, very oriented and focused on KPIs. You know what you're trying to do. You're trying different ways to do this. You're very creative. But the disadvantage is that you make throwaway code, you lose scalability, etc. And kind of vice versa. In the code base, you build for sustainability. Everything is kind of built perfectly. There's less tech debt. You're faster in terms of kind of deployment, but that means that kind of it's slower for the designers and the product people. And kind of one of the things that are important is that there is no such thing as kind of a perfect framework. So product people and like designers really love frameworks, Agile, Shape Up, Kanban, design thinking, jobs to be done, the variety of kind of ways of approaching processes. And it's great, but none of these really necessarily fit exactly what your organization is doing. So what is important is that when you adopt a new framework, you take the ideas that work for you, you kind of understand what the caveats of not kind of adopting all the principles, and you work with that to mold something that is best for your business. Kind of very much like what Patricia said before. In some organizations, you have design ops who kind of help streamline this. Some organization, when design ops kind of grow even further, you get into kind of practice managers, which kind of goes between different teams and make sure everything kind of works smoothly and takes, for example, this team does brainstorming really well, and this team does retros really well, and this team has the process to kind of, cater for dependencies. And a practice manager would kind of go and kind of distill all of these things in the document, and we'll get to a point where they say, this is amazing, this is our way, that I walk away of doing stuff. So here I have kind of a survey kind of ready for you. You can kind of fill it out. I'm curious about like how do you define your work? Do you usually work on your problems, or do you usually kind of work on other people's problems? So curious to kind of see like what you guys are thinking. And I will continue speaking while you fill it out. So one of the things that are like really, really important in design is to kind of work on your problems, work on things like it gives you a sense of accountability when you kind of you identify an issue. I always treat like designers or researchers like investigative journalists. You go into an organization, you listen to a lot of things, you notice a lot of issues, and you essentially kind of come and kind of propose a pitch or a way to kind of solve that. Going back to the point earlier, as we said, there's like code-based organization and product-based organization. At Iwoka in the past, we had like a website team, and we had a sign-up team, and we had kind of account pages team, and there was a team kind of dedicated for like introducers and accountants. But what that creates is a scenario where the website team can kind of work on a specific issue, right? And they would say, this is the most impactful thing that we can do now. And there's a PM and there's like developers all allocated for this specific goals. But actually, let's imagine that they redesigned the homepage and now the homepage is in a test or performing better. It doesn't matter at the moment. What else do they have to do? They can work on the blog, they can work on the careers page, they can work on the about page. There's many, many things that they can work on. But are they really meaningful as diving into the sign up and making a change there to increase the conversion? Probably it's better to kind of go into the sign up or identify a user problem and kind of diving into that. But no one's going to do that because the team is allocated to the website. So they will look at the most impactful thing on the website. You're almost like a horse with these kind of eyes, kind of closed, all straightforward, and you go in tunnel vision into kind of your own route. And that's a problem. So we have kind of diverted from kind of build teams specific for specific areas where we optimize, where it was code-based, to not even a product-based where it's just features for that thing, to something that we call problem-based approach. So in a problem-based approach, you go and you research the issues that your customers have, you find it, and then you fix the most impactful thing. Now, when you work in a code-based approach, if you can look at this little dude in the presentation, he has a little zit here, right? And when you imagine that you date someone and you come to the meeting and they have a zit, then you're like, okay, the zit is gonna pass. You know, maybe I'm not gonna kiss him today or her. It's gonna pass. Tomorrow I'm gonna give them a kiss. But if you go and you see lots of those, and these are referring to kind of inconsistencies, different bugs, different things that are happening because the website team did what the website team needed to do. And the sign-up team did what they needed to do. They didn't talk to each other as much, or they may have talked to each other, but they decided that it's better for the website to kind of do this thing. This creates this inconsistency. And suddenly this dude, from having like a small zit, suddenly he has a skin disease. He has acne. And that is the problem with kind of missing kind of inconsistencies. You get to a point where you start with one thing, but it creates a lot. And when you're not solving like problem-based horizontally, which is kind of the discipline of what you would call like business designers or service designers or even design ops, they all look kind of horizontally at the whole thing. Then you get to a point where you have inconsistencies, and especially in FinTech, trust is extremely, really important. So we started kind of, we read a few kind of frameworks and we kind of nailed down, kind of settled on something called ShapeUp. ShapeUp is a methodology created by Basecamp. And obviously, as I said before, a framework is not religion, it's not the law. You kind of need to adopt it to work what you do. And so far, we are kind of 5 cycles into ShapeUp. So I'm going to kind of give you like the principles, and I'm going to tell you what was different from what happened in the book to what we actually did at the end. So in the original methodology, they go on kind of maximum 6-week sprints or like cycles. And there's a pitch. A team writes a pitch, or like a product manager writes a pitch, and then the kind of development team kind of, or the project team kind of runs for 6 weeks straight on that thing. What does that give you? It gives you a lot of really, really cool things. It gives you accountability because you define it in a specific way and then the team can take it. It gives you focus because it's not when the increments are like 2-week sprints or 1-week sprints or burnout or variety of other methods. It's very easy for the product manager to just like shift things around and kind of keep changing. And then the developer or the designer end up working more on kind of other people's problems rather than their problem because they don't have time to develop their problem. The developers are kind of like always in stress because there's always like shitloads of stuff to do. They need to keep changing context. And they have no control over what they're going to work on, and it keeps changing. Like, you know, we're going this way, now we're going this way, and you end up like going in a slalom. And that slows down, you know, from my experience, 3 years at Iwoka, in the first 2 years when we were doing the other approach, like we delivered way less. And in the last kind of year, when we kind of implemented this method, we delivered way more. Locking it down to 6 weeks means that you lose flexibility, because if you're focusing on something for 6 weeks, that means that you're not going to do anything else. So then there's like this question of like, oh, what happens if there's like something urgent and all that stuff? So that's kind of a thing that we've adopted on top of ShapeUp methodology. We've introduced a team called the A team, and the A team is a team that basically kind of does maintenance, they do optimization, they kind of go and fix like all the kind of urgent stuff. But you don't want this team to kind of like run for 6 weeks continuously, right? You want, because no one likes, or none of the developers really like doing that kind of stuff. So what we created was a container, and you can see kind of the red block, the kind of dark gray blocks are cycle projects. So you can do a 6 block. So the first 2 ones in track 1 and in lane 2, they're projects, cycle projects. And in lane 3, you have 2 smaller ones. And in between, you have those gaps, and those gaps are basically the people from that specific team would kind of be on support. And then you don't end up like going crazy, like spending shitloads of time in support. You just do 2 weeks at a time, and everyone has the time where they can focus and the time where they can just like go and do lots of small things. And at the end of the cycle, you have, and that's kind of the block at the end, you have time to rest. It's called the cool-off period. It's time to do L&D, reviews, kind of close minor bits, and just like take it a little bit more easy. How does that work in kind of a longer timeline? Sometimes you have projects that you can't fit in 6 weeks. The goal is for us to kind of be able to deliver something within those 6 weeks. So we have created this concept called a track, which is a project that you can work on continuously. You can see the 3 red circles. You can work on something one after the other to make it kind of consistent, and for you to be able to commit to a specific project and deliver. And in the other kind of projects, you will have team members switching around, kind of different projects, different areas of the code base, different areas of the product, working with ops, working with collections, etc., etc. One of the things that this methodology allows you is to kind of separate the product manager from the cycle team. And the product manager then can focus on really writing very, very detailed pitches on what should we do next. If you look at this kind of timeline, in the first week, imagine that there was already like a pitch. In the first week, you would introduce the pitch that you already wrote, and you would work with the team, and you would start, and you would agree the scope and everything else. And in the other weeks following from that, you will start, we have this thing called the PM curriculum. You go and you talk to all the business stakeholders. You understand different problems, different priorities that people have. You listen to calls from the kind of customer success team, and you find all these small things or big things, and you try to categorize them and find directions, which just happens in week 4 and 5. After you find directions, you kind of work with the business owners and everyone in the business, also like the developers, to kind of try to understand how long it will take, what's the scope of this thing, how much value, how much impact we can deliver with this thing. You end up with pitches. We end up later on selecting the pitches that we're going to work on. And then week 9 and 10, which is when people are in the cool-off period, we have drop-in sessions where all the developers read the pitches, ask a lot of questions, we stress test everything, and then we decide on a betting table what we're going to work on, and we start working on that. And that is great because the developers can choose what they want to work on. And everyone can choose what they want to work on and can challenge things that they think that are not good. So we're not dictating anything. We're working together with the expertise of everyone to deliver something that is impactful. And obviously, when you work on something that you want to work on, you do a better job and you will enjoy it more. So from my perspective, at least, kind of what the Shape Up methodology initially kind of addressed was those 3 first lanes. It helped the product managers to shape what we're going to build and what we want to do. It helped the developers and the designer to develop it. And it later on, again, the responsibility of the business analyst and the PMs to analyze the results of what we've just launched into the market. The 2 things that we've added on top was optimizing on top of that and kind of recreating the pitches and improving like minor things throughout, and maintenance, because you can't have just one team just doing new things, right? Like stuff will get broken because we might have not done it correctly, or stuff will get broken because another team will do something that would challenge or like make a difference in our flow. It's all interconnected and dependent. So how does that work? So we talked about it like on the team level. Now we're going to dive into kind of the individual level. In the individual level, this is a hill chart. Again, it's not my kind of diagram. It is Basecamp, but it's a really, really great diagram. If you think of the beginning of a project, it is unknown at the beginning. You don't know what you want to do. You don't know what is the project. You don't know what's the feasibility of it. You don't know if customers really want it or need it, how long it will take to do it, etc., etc. So you're essentially climbing up the unknown, and that is essentially the process of kind of the pitch starts it, and then the rest of the team kind of comes and joins and kind of goes up with the product manager to identify what we're going to do. And then after that, it's a slope. So you slide down, you do what you know how to do, and you build that thing. Now, obviously, here in this diagram, everything is like super centered and symmetric, but life is not super centered and symmetric. Sometimes figuring out will take longer than doing. Sometimes doing will take longer. Sometimes the slope will not be equal. Sometimes the slope will be longer. But generally, when you have defined the problem and you're on top, you at least see everything that you need to kind of go. And if the slope is too long and you can't see it, that's a problem. You probably didn't define the right thing. So how does that look like in terms of kind of specific roles? You can see that the product manager kind of starts it, then the product designer kind of joins, help them kind of flesh it out, and then the engineer kind of joins. And that's kind of how they work in operations. And when they go down, it's really important. Like, this kind of symbolizes in this example, the hill chart, but also kind of the amount of work and the stress levels that kind of people have. And it's really, really important to have these kind of like slopes where it's like a little bit more relaxed for people and they can really focus on themselves and do a variety of other things. And that kind of brings us to kind of the way I see people should spend their time at work. 85% of the time they should spend really kind of focusing on what they're trying to focus. And then in this example, the design team will focus 10% of the time on the design team activities. It could be like design operations, pieces, design systems, things that we want to do and we think that we'll be able to mature later on and get to kind of the product core work. And then there is this small piece of 5% fame, which I really like. I think it's really important for people to distill their experiences, write blog posts, post on Instagram, listen to a podcast, go to events and talk to people. It's really important because I want to help people grow. No one's gonna retire at the age of 65 from Iwoka. Everyone's gonna work in the company for like between 1 to 5, 6, 7 years. And if you develop yourself and you can do things individually, it helps us recruit and it helps you kind of proceed with the journey. And at the end, I want that journey to be impactful and with learning as much as possible. And as you kind of know, not everyone is like, we don't have like the luxury to have people from each discipline within the team. So a researcher, we don't have a researcher for each cycle team. I wish we did, but it just doesn't exist, like usually, unless you're in like a really, really big business. So what does the research kind of diagram looks like? Well, the research then kind of sits and kind of helps and kind of does a lot of self-serving. The PMs and the designers do a lot of research themselves, usually usability, like the easier pieces. But the research, the kind of the way where they interact is in the preparation of a pitch, where when you write the script, when you try to understand what you're researching, what questions you're going to ask, how you're going to ask them. There's a lot of work for the researchers to kind of pair with the designer or the product manager to help them. When you talk to users, that's obviously something that is learned way more easily. So that's something that PM or the designer can do. When you try to analyze and kind of distill all this information, then again, there's like a jump at work for the researcher. And when you share it, again, slightly less work. And like one other concept that is really important about this, about cycles and kind of times to rest. If you look at lions, you can see that lions have two states. One state when they're attacking, and they can go for like 2 days. If they decide, if they're hungry and they decided they go for a prey, they will go for 2 days, like full on super powerful thing. And then they will just, after they ate, they will just chill, probably for like they could chill for a week. And this kind of idea of like the prehistoric person, where all the men would just go into the forest and hunt, and then they will just like go and rest after they brought enough food for the village, is something that I really like. We want people to focus. We want people to go all in and then be able to rest. So here, there's like a video that can be shown. And if I'm just gonna play it kind of behind me in a loop, if you look at my picture. So what you have here is how I look at the amount of time that you need to spend in the present versus the past. You need to spend a lot of time in the future. You can say, I'm doing MVP, but at the end, you will get to a point where you do just incremental work. If you don't think of the vision, if you don't design the best thing that could be possible, and then take the best piece from the best thing and then try to bring it to the present and kind of anchor it in the real details, you're not doing the job right. If you're just like really focusing, and like, if you look at the survey, when you mostly design, you shouldn't be mostly designing for the week. You shouldn't be mostly designing for the next month. You should probably design most of the time for the next quarter, and then spend 60% of your time more or less on kind of the details. It's really important. Now I'm gonna glimpse into this because I'm kind of running out of time, but on an individual level, each person has like different influences, and each person is good in specific things. So some people really like reading the market and learning from competitors. Some people are really good at talking to customers. Some people are really good internally talking to kind of the rest of the product team or other teams. And all of these are like inputs or influence points. As a person in the middle, in this example, it's a PM, but it could definitely be also a designer or a researcher or a developer. You need to kind of get information from some places, but you also need to influence some places. It is harder to influence customers without kind of launching something. But although there are some people that kind of take advantage of user research to influence and kind of convert it into marketing. So that's something that we've seen kind of people do with usertesting.com, by the way. The main goal of a PM is to kind of create pitches and ideas bucket and kind of affect the cycle team. And you can use these inputs and outputs. And as a designer or developer, you can do that too. These are usually small teams at Iwoka. It's even more than like a 2-pizza team. It's like a pizza team. And because of that, we think that everyone is like really empowered, and it breaks down and we're able to deliver. So sometimes we will bring people with expertise into the team, or sometimes we will bring them to parts of the cycle. But generally, those smaller teams will deliver like huge amounts of value, and that will make everyone empowered and accountable. And to kind of make sure that it works really well, since the kind of product manager is operating in different areas and kind of writing pitches and not really focusing what's happening, the team lead will kind of go and like deliver kind of a comms life cycle. They will have like drop-in sessions and kind of testing demos across the time to make sure that everything is digestible, to make sure that everyone knows what they're doing, to make sure that there are any kind of warning flags if something goes wrong. And essentially the PM's role is to kind of set some sort of guardrails of like, this is the pitch, this is where we play, this is what we're doing, this is what we're not doing. And then the team kind of runs free and do whatever they want to do within that, because the designer will design and the developer will build, and they are the best people to decide what needs to be built or what needs to be designed. Thank you very much for listening. Happy to kind of answer any questions. By the way, we are hiring, so feel free to kind of go on our website and have a look. We're looking for designers, PMs, and researchers. And this afternoon, another amazing Iwokan is speaking. His name is Carlos. I think he speaks at 4 and a bit. So in the B2C area, feel free to watch his talk.
Thank you so much, Avi. I actually have a lot of questions to you, but I just want to start with the one we have on the chat now. So Nimrod is asking, any tips on how to make sure there's a balance and not all engineers choose one project?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Nimrod. There's a variety of ways. I think that as a business, you want to make sure that you're not hyping a specific area. Like everyone knows what areas like the CEO or someone has the focus on. But the idea in kind of writing these pitches is that it makes each and every one of them important. And in the bigger projects, usually you will have more designers or more developers, which means that your contribution is potentially smaller. So it depends on kind of, I think like it's about variability. Some developers prefer to work in a specific project with, let's say, 3 other developers, and they will get like different things from that. And some developers prefer to work solely with a designer or like on a small hack that they do themselves. And for a developer to grow, it is important for them to have each and one of these experiences. You need to work without rules or to work with rules. You need to work with team or without a team. And the pitch is the thing that kind of makes each and every one of them actually important, and where it values. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes people don't get what they want to work on. And in those instances, you would give them in the next round something that they want to kind of work on.
Amazing. I have a question from the design perspective. How do you ensure that the product designers spend a lot of time in the future? Because you mentioned it's important to think ahead.
Yeah. Designers usually have this tendency to want to change unnecessary things. For example, they would want to rebrand after 2 years after the rebrand happened. Why would you want to do that? Like, what's the problem? What's the problem? Now there's always new problems, and if you kind of work in this kind of way of investigative journalism and you kind of find these like bits and bobs, you always find ways to kind of solve for the future. As systems get more complex, as your company grows bigger, there's always these like complexity issues that you're trying to kind of tackle and solve. The way you kind of work for the future is, if you look at like all the stuff that a designer needs to do, if they do all those things from research to visual design to motion and how it moves, there is an inevitability to work in the future, because usually the present requires a superficial reaction. So if you're a good designer and you want to use all your skills and you want to grow, then you should be working on the future, because you can't implement or work in this extent. You don't have the time. Sometimes people are not as interested to kind of work on what great looks like in the present. It's just impossible.
I see. And in your process, working in the future, is it for the discovery and the directions phases, or is it done throughout the entire cycle?
It's not just for the discovery. So imagine that you worked on a dashboard that lets all the brokers kind of see all their applications for Iwoka. Now, there is a dashboard already, but it is essentially some sort of project management or tool, right? So you have Asana, you have a variety of like inspirations from that. Now, obviously, you can't do that now, and actually, maybe it's not going to be valuable to kind of convert this thing to Asana, because actually they use other portals for that. They don't just use Iwoka. I'm not managing, and like they're not managing, for example, Funding Circle or any other lender that they're going to. So they're using it a limited period of time. So you could hypothetically say, there's nothing else to do. I'm just going to keep like churning the kind of the present and not take it further. But actually, there are many features in project management tools that you can learn from. What you need to design is, you need to design the end state, what you want like the best to be. And then you need to kind of go with the PM and show it and like do research with them and see what they're actually using and what they're not using. And to be able to do that, you will need like high fidelity prototypes. It's not enough to have like a Figma click-through prototype. You would really need to kind of make people feel that it's real. And then, because then you are really able to get feedback. And again, it kind of goes back to kind of utilizing the whole design skills, that you have, and not just like staying in the superficial or like simple or ways to do it fast. I really like, having kind of the ability to kind of churn things really, really quickly. But unless you go into real professionalism, you won't be able to kind of understand what really needs to be built and what really has the potential to work. And you will just do like a lot of really, really small tests. At Iwoka specifically, it's not Tinder that you have like millions of customers that you can just like open an A/B test of like a minor thing that you did for like millions of people in Brazil for a week and like get like useful insights. It's a B2B. These are small businesses that want loans. We're talking about 100 of applications rather than like a day, rather than like thousands or millions or tens of thousands. So to kind of go and focus on these like really, really small things and try to tweak them, you're not going to get anywhere, and you won't be able to test that. You need to make big moves. And for you to be able to make big moves, you need to think very, very deeply on the future and test it.